Okay, it's my first ever crafting video. What should I make? I wanted to have meaning. I also really wanted to be very something like the beginning. Maybe the stars need to align with my ideas, the vibes of the channel, my MBTI personality, what's my favorite of my favorite food, something with the channel. Everything relies on first impressions. No big deal, no pressure. Hey everyone, it's me Klein, and for my first video, after a lot of careful calculations and brainstorming, I decided to make a mini chameleon. You know, because what could be more meaningful than getting to boop your favorite animal snoot? Nobody else? Okay, I guess that's just me. Well, I'm starting off by taking some white, blue, and yellow polymer clay and combining them to make my favorite color, green. Don't worry if your clay feels crumbly, maybe it just needs more kneading and conditioning. Although I think I got too carried away and now I'm doing whatever that is that I'm doing. And after all that distraction, I took this thumbnail-sized piece, smushed it around to make sure that it doesn't have any cracks. I shaped that into a little green taco, and I carefully pinched off one end and stretched it until it's almost longer than the rest of the body. Now I'm trying my best to roll it. If only my hand could cooperate, and please stop shaking so much. Are you okay? Are you nervous? I hope you're not dying on your first video. Well, after that trouble with the tail, I'm working on the head, and as you can see, I'm performing the ancient and sacred technique that the greatest artists call push, which stands for pinch until sculpting happens. Yeah, sorry, I got really intimidated to use all of my sculpting tools, so I ended up using my jelly hands. Well, what I did here is pinch the sides of the head to make those eyebrow chameleon bone things, and I also pinched the back of the head to make that other chameleon bone thing. Welcome to Kleinville, where we got top-notch extensive knowledge on animal anatomy. After working on the head, I did a little bit more pinches to the back to add some detail. Once I'm feeling okay with the shape, I use this crafting knife to carve the mouth and also this flat tool to make it deeper. Then I just pinched that close. And now I'm baking that on a heat-resistant silicone mold with some cornstarch to prevent the clay from being deformed. Now onto the limbs. I'm rolling out a thin log. There's no complicated math to this. I just cut the length of whatever looks right to me. Anyway, I bent those limbs to give them some elbows and knees. And what do you know? After baking them, I trimmed them because they weren't the right size. Whatever looks right. I also did a diagonal slice for the upper parts of the limbs because I wanted them to fit snug against the body and to stick them the right way. To glue the pieces together, I whipped up some green clay and some liquid clay because liquid clay on its own is way too runny for what I'm trying to do, and I think that this mixture is just the right consistency. I first sticked and baked one side before doing the other side to make sure that none of the limbs would get ruined. And guess what? I trimmed the limbs again. But this time, I did that to make room for some claws. I took a tiny circle and cut that into 4 slices. Then I rolled those into tiny olives and gave that a chop down the middle. This was quite the eye-squinty work because I used some sculpting tools to make the claws as smooth as I could. And after a short bake, I stick those to the limbs using the same slimy clay. And right when I was on my last few steps, I finally noticed that the mouth looks so crooked. Oh well, I can't really turn back at this point, so let's just all agree not to look at it from the front. Anyway, this chameleon seems unpolished and rough around the edges, so I thought I'd use this nail file that literally says success. Because I'm desperately hoping that it can make this look good after all of my mistakes. But just as I anticipated, the nail file failed to do anything. So here I am, relying on my crafting knife again to chop away some of that excess clay. Then I took another tiny ball, sliced that into half, each one rolled to a ball and stuck to the head as eyes. Then I poked a dot in the middle using a needle tool. Finally, I made the green glue a lot more liquid and just used a bunch of my tools to fill up some of the gaps, strengthen the connections, and to make it seem like the chameleon is in one smooth piece. After the final bake, I was originally going to stop there, delete the video, run away, and never look back. Because, as much as I think that this is so ugly that it's cute, I felt like it just wasn't good enough for anyone else. But I didn't want to admit defeat, so I fought against those thoughts and gathered as much hope and confidence as I could to make this better. And all that I came up with is to make a terrarium for this creature, because my logic is that maybe a busy looking environment will distract anyone from seeing how terrible this chameleon is. Listen, that's terrible advice for real life, so don't listen to me. This is clay we're talking about. So I've got this dome, which is a good size, and I'm about to make some fake grass for it. I ripped a piece of paper and squished the polymer clay on top of that. I'm using a needle to make very small swirls until the grass texture is complete. I wanted to make a broken branch for the chameleon to rest on top, so I mixed up some really crumbly brown, yellow, and white clay to make a softer wood color. I tried my best to make a jagged and organic looking branch by just pinching some random sides. Use the glue to stick the branch and a piece of crumpled paper for temporary support. Then I used the needle once again to draw some lines to mimic a wooden texture and just poke the broken ends. Before baking, I put the paper back so that gravity won't ruin the shape. To make this even more distracting, I made some rocks by partially mixing some gray and black clay. And lastly, I added some moss in random places. Time to give this a bit more depth using green and brown acrylic paint and a drop of water. First, I darkened the moss with pure acrylic. Then I used a technique on the wood, which, if I remember correctly, is called antiquing, which means diluting the paint with some water and brushing it all around and letting the paint go inside the nooks and crannies of the details. Then you wipe off the exposed paint. And I also went ahead and used the remainder of the paint to give the grass a little more dirt and shadow so it doesn't look flat and boring. The terrarium is done, but now I gotta give the chameleon a similar glow up. So what's this? If you think that it looks suspiciously like it has already been painted and erased because of yet another mistake by yours truly, then you're absolutely right. Let's just recap my embarrassing painting and just get this over with. At first, I didn't really know how to color a chameleon. Even though I've already done so much browsing on the internet, I just couldn't wrap my head around choosing a pattern or a color scheme. So I just went with my gut feel, which was very wrong. Because in all of my confusion, I kept on adding colors and random blots and stripes, and the madness didn't even stop there. I was thinking of a way to salvage my work instead of starting the paint job all over again. So in my panic, I thought I was being a genius and added some chicken pox. And that's when I gave up and wiped away my shame. Good thing my cheap paint didn't stain it too much. So here we are again with a blank slate, and I'm pretending the last few minutes didn't just happen. At least this time, I was armed with some experience and the knowledge that sometimes simplicity is what works best. This time, I'm just adding some subtle green stripes and some pale yellow outlines and a linear pattern on the side. Okay, stop, drop the brush. Don't even think about adding some weird yellow spots. Finally, after so much time working on this thing, I can move on with my life. For one tiny sculpture, this was quite the adventure. It's certainly not hyper-realistic, but for my first video, I'm satisfied with its cartoony and whimsical vibe.
Oh, that's alright.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button. I really appreciate the support, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time here at Kleinveld.